Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Taylor, and I hope you're all having a wonderful week so far. Today's episode, we're going to get into anxiety in our thoughts and in our feelings. We're going to be talking with Dr. Scott Symington, who is a licensed clinical psychologist, and he's dedicated to helping adults overcome worry, anxiety, negative moods, addictive behaviors, and all kinds of other conditions that steal our joy and our freedom. He actually speaks regularly at professional conferences, large church groups, graduate schools and universities, and business groups, including the Young Presidents Organization. He also earned a PhD in clinical psychology from the Fuller Graduate School of Psychology and completed a master's in theology from Fuller Theological Seminary. His career path began in the business and consulting world. And then in 1998, after much soul searching, he decided to leave a lucrative position brokering agricultural products to pursue his true passion, clinical psychology, a profession that lined up with both his head and his heart. One of his primary interests, which is informed by his diverse experiences and trainings, is making the evidence-based methods of psychology and spiritual wisdom easy to understand and apply to your daily life. So Dr. Symington has a book called Freedom from Anxious Thoughts and Feelings, a two-step mindfulness approach for moving beyond fear and worry. He presents an intuitive and accessible approach called the two-screen method to help when you feel overwhelmed and overcome with worrisome thoughts. Using the simplified mindfulness approach, you'll actually learn to make space for the challenging thoughts and feelings, also while then redirecting your attention and life energy to your values. By using the two-screen method, along with its three anchors, mindfulness skills, healthy distractions, and loving action, you learn to relate to your thoughts and feelings in a whole new way. When the internal challenges show up, worries, fears, dark moods, you're equipped with an easy-to-follow game plan so you can experience relief and get back to living your life, which wouldn't we all love to do? So without any further ado, we will welcome Dr. Symington to the show. And thank you so much for being here. I know so many people struggle with having these anxious thoughts and feelings and having an actual, legitimate, evidence-based, practical approach to dealing with that, I think is very needed and very helpful.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and I definitely do want to get into, a lot of what you have in your book and, the two-screen method. But first, would love to just kind of start off, you weren't always a clinical psychologist. I don't think you started out in life to become a clinical psychologist. So I would love to hear a little bit of kind of how you got into this. Being a therapist myself, a lot of people always ask how did you decide this was what you wanted to do?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. When I graduated college in 93, I had this huge sense of relief, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, I'm never going to take another course as long as I live, right? And,
yeah.
And I had no idea that I had all of these years of schooling ahead of me, but I didn't really fit that academic mold at that time. I was just more interested in business and building things and kind of being out there and not necessarily in the classroom. And so I was in business for several years, brokering agricultural products and doing other things. And that went well. But after a while, because I'm somebody that's pretty sensitive to meaning, I want to make sure that my life is meaningful and I'm using my time wisely. I just, I lost kind of motivation just to go to the office every day. And it really had me reevaluate just how I'm wired as a person, what I care about the most, and really explore what's a profession that lines up with both my head and heart. And it was through that I decided I want to be a psychologist, and I had to go to graduate school and take on those challenges. But I also, and we could get into it, I also had my own struggles growing up. The method featured in the book and a lot of my work, it's born out of my clinical training, my experience with clients, and my own personal history, right? So because that piece is always important and can inform people's work.
Yeah. And as you go through that process of, figuring out where you do find meaning in your life, I'm curious if talk therapy was a part of that for you.
It was actually, yeah. Now, where I really got into therapy was actually in graduate school when I was in my clinical psychology program. And when I think of myself as a clinician and what has helped me be the best clinician possible, I elevate my own personal therapy way above the training that I got. Obviously the training is critical as well, but it's really hard to replace your own personal work and journey and transformation and the things that you had to overcome and face and make those connections. It's invaluable.
Yeah, it's I get a lot of questions of like, what are your tips for going into grad school? And always my biggest one is like, don't forget to focus on your own work, because it is so valuable, not only to your own personal life, but also to the work that you'll then do with your own clients. Thank you for touching on that.
Yeah.
All right. So before we continue, I just want to take a quick break here to share one of my favorite sponsors of the podcast with our listeners here. And I'm really curious how often you guys actually think about your socks, because if you're like me, it used to be like never. But I recently discovered socks that have seriously changed the way I think about socks. And they're called Bombas. So not only are they literally so incredibly, like probably the most comfortable socks in the history of feet, but they're made from super soft natural cotton, and every pair comes with arch support, a seamless toe, and a cushioned footbed that's comfy, but also like not too thick. The colors and patterns are seriously very, very cute. One of my pairs is like a really light green, and it's just like one of my favorite pairs of socks, not only because it's comfortable, but it looks really cute and it like fits my aesthetic, fits my vibe. The socks are great for wearing at the gym and the office, out on the town. They are literally what feet daydream about. I'm not even kidding. And honestly, my favorite part about this company, I did some research in this company and I just love everything that they stand for. But they actually provide a pair of Bombas socks to someone in need for every purchase that you make. And the whole part of how the company even got started in the first place was because they learned that socks was the number one thing that homeless people were requesting as a good that they needed. So really love supporting this company, and I'm super happy to have them as a sponsor on the podcast. So you guys should buy your Bombas at bombas.com/Taylor today and get 20% off of your first purchase. That's bombas.com. That's BOMBAS.com/Taylor for 20% off. Again, get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com/Taylor. And I hope you guys check them out. We all need socks. And so if you're going to get them, I hope you guys get them from Bombas, because they're a good company to support, and they also give back. So super happy to have them as a sponsor on the podcast. But now we can kind of get on back to the show.
So are you in part-time, full-time private practice?
Yeah. So right now I do like part-time because I also manage doing the podcast and then partnerships on Instagram as well. So I kind of just try to balance the three of those. I've just gotten back into it after kind of a 2.5, 3-ish year break of, pursuing other things in my life that I figured I had always done school just like very one-track minded. I did my bachelor's in 3 years and went straight into my master's, and then was like, all right, I'm going to be fully licensed by 25 and can start my practice and all of this. And now I'm just turned 26 and I'm just working towards my hours.
Okay.
But the life experiences that I've had during that time, I think were super critical to my own personal development and my own kind of personal work. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think it's interesting that as you go along this process and, you're at the place where you're at now, that acknowledging doing your own work and how even coming up with something like this 2-screen process has been of benefit for you as well. I'm curious, kind of, before we get into what it is and how to do it and all of that, if you can share a little bit of kind of how it came about.
Yeah, so I specialize in anxiety disorders. I mean, I see, I treat all sorts of different kind of issues and symptoms, and work with individuals and adults. But one area of specialty is anxiety disorders, and that's something that even personally I can relate to. In my early 20s, I went through a period where I was really wrestling with anxious thoughts and anxious episodes, and it was really a very, very difficult time. And so that's always in the backdrop, and that's part of what fuels my passion to help people break free from patterns of worry and anxious feelings. I just know how torturous that can be, and I'm also aware that we have so many tools and strategies that can help people break free of that very painful pattern. Yeah. So I'm definitely a freedom junkie, and when people come to see me and they're anxious worriers and they struggle with anxiety, I'm passionate and very motivated to help them break free as soon as possible and as effectively as possible. So that's always been in the forefront of my mind. And one of the things that I ran into early on in my clinical work is what I refer to as the translation problem, which is if you're sitting on my couch and you're in an anxious state, if I were to say to you, okay, what I want you to do is just accept the anxious feeling, don't fight it, but don't dwell on it either, okay? Now, I know if you take my words and apply what I have in my mind, right, which is essentially, this is a mindfulness approach to anxiety, I know that if you apply the words in the way that I'm thinking them, that anxious feeling will begin to dissipate and you will feel better. The translation problem occurs, though, in the fact that you're alone in your internal world. We are alone on the inside. There's nobody in there saying, hey, turn left here, turn right here. This is what acceptance means. Like, how are we supposed to know what even that word means in terms of a mental or emotional step, right? There's a breakdown there. And so I was very aware of, oh my gosh, there's all these things that can help people. And I know eventually it'll get traction and they'll understand how to apply it. But I wanted them to connect with that helpful strategy and tool as early as possible. And I didn't think the translation problem was a good excuse for, the sort of the ongoing suffering, that they were going through. So I wanted to find a way to bypass that translation problem. And then what emerged out of my clinical work is a visual-based model where we get away from using language and instead we deal with an image, a very intuitive image that we both have in our mind. And then basically you can relate to thoughts and feelings visually and spatially. And we can get into the model, but it's an image of 2 screens. And so you apply these helpful strategies and tools by relating to this image as directed, and then we bypass that breakdown, that translation problem. That was a very long-winded answer, by the way, to your question.
No worries. I love when I ask a question, people can just run with it. And so then was this something that as you were dealing with your anxiety kind of in your early 20s, it sounded like, that you were able to kind of start applying to yourself and starting to realize how this process could come about to help with your own anxiety?
So I wish I had the 2-screen method. I wish I had read a book that said, hey, this is what's going on in your internal world. This is how you relate to anxious thoughts and feelings to make them less powerful inside you. So this is the model I wish I would have had. I had to bump into walls and struggle and stumble. And what I eventually found was a mindfulness-based approach and the power of radical acceptance and not fighting these internal threats, which is very counterintuitive. It's not natural, right? We're designed to neutralize threats, and that's what an anxious thought or feeling is. It feels like something important to us is at risk or in jeopardy, or it's that physical, mental, emotional, and physical experience of being under threat. And it's unnatural not to do something in that state, to try to push it away or run from it or hyper-focus on it. So, but when I discovered the principle of acceptance and that truly was an antidote to anxiety, and it took me a while both to discover it and really learn how to apply it in these states. But once I did, that's when I really began to break free. And then I was like, okay, I want to help people apply this approach more effectively and more quickly so they don't have to stumble around in the dark like I did.
Yeah. And it is a very strange thing to think about. I mean, having those anxieties and those fears, in a way, they're kind of these walls to protect us against things that, you know, we don't want to face, or we sometimes feel like we don't know how to face. And I think even just the notion of, you know, allowing yourself to feel your feelings, which I say all the time, and even doing that requires this certain level of acceptance that this is what you're experiencing. It feels like such an uncomfortable, dangerous place to be.
It's so unnatural, but so necessary. And I'm saying to my clients all the time, in those anxious places, say to yourself, I'm willing to have this experience. I'm willing to have these feelings. That doesn't mean that you like them, that you endorse them, right? Of course, life would be easier without them, but taking the fight out of it, because thoughts and feelings, like everything else on the planet, they need energy to keep going. And it's that reactivity that it's a primary energy source. So it actually keeps it going. Where people struggle in this area is applying the acceptance, which is unnatural, okay, but then also knowing where to go with their mind. Right? They don't know what to focus on, even when they're applying the principle of acceptance. And the two-screen method is a user-friendly application of mindfulness that addresses those two issues. Both, I'm getting a little message here about internet connection. Anyway, so
sometimes technology doesn't like to work when I do these.
That's right, but we move into acceptance, don't we?
Yes.
We don't dwell on it. We don't fight it. We just sort of let go.
Yes. All right. So before we continue, I just want to take a quick break to share one of our sponsors for the podcast that helps make this podcast possible, and that is ARC. So honestly, I mean, I brush my teeth twice a day. I even floss every night. Maybe you guys do sometimes. But did you know that there's actually another level of oral care? And with ARC, you can help remove stains that lie beneath the surface of your smile. So it's a new way to achieve professional level teeth whitening at home for just 30 minutes a day. Each ARC treatment includes dentist approved enamel safe whitening strips that adhere to your upper and lower teeth, along with ARC blue light technology. The blue light mouthpiece arcs around your entire smile, delivering targeted blue light energy to help weaken set-in stains below the enamel surface, making your treatment more effective than just strips alone. ARC can help you reveal a smile that's 50 times whiter than a leading whitening toothpaste, and they offer satisfaction guaranteed. And to help our listeners get a whiter, brighter smile, ARC is offering $15 off your purchase of a blue light kit when you visit arcsmile.com and use promo code TALK at checkout. Go to arcsmile.com and use promo code TALK for $15 off your blue light whitening kit. That's arcsmile.com with promo code TALK. And I hope you guys enjoy. And now we can get back to the show.
So Yeah. So like with the 2-screen method, it addresses both of those. It guides you through the mental and emotional steps that diffuse anxious thoughts and feelings while giving you anchors or tethers for your attention so that you don't sit there and run that worry through your mind over and over again, which is another way that it gets energy.
Yeah, those ruminating thoughts. And it takes so much more energy actually to like fight those feelings and to try to kind of push those away or avoid them. And I'm curious kind of, as we talk about all this, I'm reminded, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this book. It's called The Untethered Soul. Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's almost
book.
it's almost reminded me of kind of this, you are the observer of your thoughts, and almost kind of taking that kind of mindset to looking at some of this stuff. And I've mentioned that statement before on the pod and in some other podcast interviews as well. And it was such a difficult concept to wrap your head around, to separate yourself from these thoughts. And I think almost even, I think we should definitely explain the 2-screen methods. People know what we're talking about. But in that way where you are kind of turning towards and accepting and looking at this thing, it is almost that concept of you are the observer of your thoughts.
That is such a good point. And things really change when people have that realization that thoughts and feelings are a part of us, but they don't define us. And there is a part of self that can sit back and watch that thought coming into awareness and this feeling showing up inside us, where we can have a posture of curiosity, like, wow, isn't that interesting, that anxious feeling showing up? Or, wow, that's kind of a weird thought, like as it's floating by. Like we have a tendency to over-identify with the thoughts that just come into our mind, sometimes involuntarily, or these feelings that show up inside us as if they speak to our identity, when really they're not always that meaningful, and we don't have to over-identify with them. And a lot of what mindfulness, or a byproduct of mindfulness training, is to create more separation between that internal observer and all of this activity that can show up on the inside, that there's a little bit more space in there so that we don't fuse or over-identify with, especially the potentially problematic thoughts and feelings showing up inside us.
Yeah, and oftentimes those problematic ones are the ones that we fixate on the most, unfortunately.
Yes, that's right. We're not fusing with all the good stuff. We really attach to those kind of fear-based, worrisome thoughts. And I think it's interesting because as we even talk about acceptance, that when you do become aware of this internal observer that you have, that does almost give you this sense of freedom that you talked about. Absolutely. Yeah. It gives you more psychological freedom and flexibility in how to relate to that challenging thought or feeling, where to go with your attention, what choice, rather than just kind of fusing, let's say, with that anxious feeling, and then it's in charge, it's dictating and just whipping you around. Yep.
Another kind of little like metaphor I like to use when talking about some of our emotions like this is making sure that you're in the driver's seat and not letting your emotions come up and, take over and start driving the car, and shoving you in the back seat to become aware that, like, I'm the driver in this. In my brain, I'm the driver, and I notice back there. I hear you. I hear you back there. You're really anxious about this interview. Like, I hear it.
I love that, because I also like the idea of some unwelcome passengers that we have at times. Like there are a few passengers that get in the car that, okay, we kind of wish they weren't in the car, but we allow them to take the ride, but they're in the back seat, right? We're driving the car. So, maybe we look back and say, hi, anxiety. I know you're here, but I'm driving.
Yes.
and I'm not going to fight your presence because that will give it more power. So we do definitely have some unwelcome passengers. The question is, and this relates to this topic, which is there are the thoughts and feelings that show up inside us, and then there is our relationship to the thoughts and feelings that show up inside us. And most people don't really think too much about us having a relationship with thoughts and feelings, but we do. There's choices in how we respond and how we react to the thoughts that come into our mind and the feelings that show up inside us. And ideally, we want to strike a healthy relationship with problematic thoughts and feelings where they will have less power and presence in our life. And really, and this is where mindfulness comes in, and why mindfulness is so big in psychology right now, is the principles of mindfulness are helping direct people towards a healthy relationship with these problematic thoughts and feelings that can show up inside us.
Yeah, totally. And even when you are applying those mindfulness techniques to those thoughts and feelings, it kind of includes all those things that we did just talk about too, that acceptance, that internal observer, that freedom. It really just kind of bundles all of that in.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. All right, so it's time for a quick break. I want to share a new sponsor of the podcast that I'm really excited about. I received my piece earlier this week, and I'm obsessed with it. So I don't know if you guys have ever purchased jewelry and then got like a green ring around your finger from like something that you spent way too much money on. But that is kind of actually what sparked Orate from being created by two friends. It sparked up a conversation and how they were fed up with the traditional jewelry market, and now they produce ethically made jewelry made in New York City that helps empower women with the best jewelry options without sacrificing style. One of my favorite pieces about this jewelry company is that for every piece sold, a child in need receives a book to help further their education. So it's really, they're doing good things here, and they sell directly to you without any like middleman markup. So they can offer you the same quality as a traditional Fifth Avenue brand at a fraction of the cost. I received my necklace. It's the Infinity Bar necklace, and it's so freaking cute. It's simple. It's classic. I absolutely love it. I really encourage you guys to check them out. You can get 15% off your first Orate purchase. Go to oratenewyork.com/Taylor and use promo code Taylor. Again, that's AURATE NewYork.com/Taylor and use promo code Taylor and get 15% off your first order. And I highly recommend the Infinity Bar necklace. It is my favorite, and I've got so many compliments on it, and it goes literally perfectly with like every outfit that I wear. So make sure to check that out, and I'm excited to have them as a sponsor on the pod. So hope you guys enjoy them, and we can get back to the show. I would love for you to kind of tell our listeners here a little bit more about how the two-screen method works and kind of what it is.
Yeah, so the two-screen method, which is featured in my book, Freedom from Anxious Thoughts and Feelings, what you do is you imagine your internal world, right? So all the different thoughts and feelings that show up inside you as a media room with two screens. There's a front screen and there's a side screen. So on the forward-facing wall on the front screen is where we experience the present moment and the more life-giving and positive thoughts, feelings, images, meaning. It's all of that internal activity that translates into a sense of well-being, right? And that doesn't mean that life is perfect, right? But it's that sense of, I'm in a pretty good space. Today's I'm living a good day, and nothing's perfect, but I'm feeling connected and aligned with kind of the best version of myself. That's all the front screen. And you're on my front screen right now, because at the present moment, talking about something that's meaningful to me, right? And so we're all naturally trying to log time on the front screen. But the challenge is off to the right, still inside our head, is a side screen in this media room. And that is where the threats, fears, insecurities, anxious feelings, potentially destructive moods show up. So with the two-screen method, it shows you how to relate to the content showing up on the side screen in a way where it will fade into the background, where those problematic thoughts and feelings will dissipate, while also giving you anchors or tethers to stay more on the front screen in your daily life, especially when you're feeling the pull to hang out on the side screen. And usually it's best if we just kind of walk through an illustration and actually how you would apply it.
Totally.
Would that be okay?
Totally, yeah. Let's give like a real life example here.
Okay. So let's say you walk away from a really awkward social interaction. Okay.
A first date.
You're trying to stay. Exactly, yeah. Most people can relate, right, to a little bit of social anxiety. Yeah, so you're walking away from this awkward social interaction, and that side screen lights up, and your internal eyes reflexively swivel over to take a look, and scrolling across the screen is, oh gosh, that was such a stupid thing to say, right? And what we tend to do is hang out on that side screen, which is the equivalent of going away in our mind, and we start reviewing the social tapes, okay? Like what I said, what they said, the facial expressions, right? We're just kind of unpacking it, okay, in our mind. And as we sit there and sort through those worries and insecure feelings on the side screen, we're in danger of energizing and emboldening that side screen, because those thoughts and feelings are feeding off the spotlight of attention and our reactivity, right? If we're not careful, that side screen is going to turn into an IMAX theater with Dolby surround sound, and then we can't rotate back to the front screen. And that is often what people refer to as rumination, or stuck in a worry loop, okay? So the way that you would apply the two-screen method here, and I would like to say here that what shows up on the side screen is involuntary. Okay, you can't control it from lighting up and from that worry coming into your mind, or that insecure feeling, right? So you're walking away from the social interaction, the side screen lights up, there's that reflexive swivel of your internal eyes. So no free will has been exercised yet.
It's like a baby seeing like a phone screen light up. You're just, whoa, what's that?
Yeah, you're just like, whoa, what's that, right? And then human instinct kicks in, because this is a threat and we want to analyze and neutralize threats, okay? But with the two-screen method, you get better at catching yourself right away, hanging out on that side screen, and applying the first step, which is accept and redirect. You redirect back to the front screen while allowing the anxious tape to play in your peripheral vision. It's almost like having an anxious heckler. Like I'm doing an interview with you, and there's a person standing to my right over here, sort of hurling insults at me and poking me, and right. It's not easy, right? It's distracting, but I say to myself, I accept this current experience, okay, and I'm going to choose life with my attention here. I'm going out of wisdom and knowledge that anxious thoughts and feelings feed off the spotlight of attention and resistance. I'm going to lean forward on the front screen and not fight sort of the content and the anxious, insecure heat that's coming off the side screen. And when my internal eyes sort of go back to that side screen, which they will, especially in the beginning, I keep gently redirecting back to the front screen. And so then the second step of the two-screen method is using one or more of the front screen anchors. And there's a chapter in the book on each anchor.
Yeah.
Right. And
one of them, I feel like you just almost kind of talked about, just even that, having that mindfulness layer there. But I like that you even said gently coming back to the front screen, because I think so often when we do become aware of those things that are coming up on the side screen, that then even more judgment and even more shame can start to come up, and we start to beat ourselves up for even thinking those thoughts. And then that almost becomes like a third screen over here
totally.
of even more
multiplying.
stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. No, that's so true. Yeah. You're being very careful not to exercise judgment and gently redirecting over and over again back to the front screen. And really that, what you're leveraging there is neuroplasticity. You're laying down new neuronal pathways in that redirection process.
I haven't heard that word in a long time.
Yeah.
Bringing me back to school.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So there's a muscle set in there that one is needing to exercise, because there's a pull on our mind to hang out with the worries on that side screen, to resolve them in some way, to restore a sense of security. And then we want to go back to living life. But that's the trap.
Yeah.
Where the true freedom is moving forward with your life and attention, even when you feel under threat, even when that side screen is kicking off some anxious heat, some insecurity, and there's some unwelcome thoughts scrolling across the screen. Okay? But it's not a one-stop shop. You have to keep gently redirecting back to the front screen. And yes, using mindfulness skills to lean into the present moment, sometimes engaging just in a healthy distraction or activity, something that's sticky for your attention. Or the third anchor, one of my personal favorites, is engaging in a loving action where you take this nervous energy from the side screen and you use it as tailwind to express the best version of yourself. So it becomes a reminder to send an encouraging text, engage in an act of kindness, think or pray for somebody you know is going through a difficult time, right? So that you create a new association. It becomes like an internal reminder, that side screen activation, to do one of these items on a menu that express that reflect the very best parts of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And could you maybe just expand on some examples as to what like a healthy distraction would be? Scrolling through social media would not be one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's preferable to hanging out and feeding anxious thoughts and feelings on the side screen, but not ideal, right? So typically, in the book, I break down healthy distractions around physical exercise, pleasurable activities, what I call enlivening activities, and under that would be doing something that's creative or adventurous or challenging, right? So the primary goal is to keep the spotlight of attention off that side screen. Right? So because that is a major energy source for the worries and for those feelings showing up on the side screen. But it's always good to do something that's going to move your life forward in a positive way. So, so not only keeping your eyes off that side screen, but okay, let's take that energy out for a jog or a yoga class, or why not let that be a reminder to practice some chords on the guitar or the piano, or to do something that's soothing, take a bath with some, nice music in the background, or call that friend that you've been wanting to talk to, and don't focus on the worry, but connecting with them. So it really could be anything. And I get into more details in the book, but something ideally that moves your life forward.
Yeah. And one thing I like about kind of your explanation, both with the healthy distractions and the loving actions, is that both of those are actually like positive coping skills, healthy coping skills to have when dealing with things. And I think a lot of people struggle with identifying even how they cope with life and the struggles that come up, and B, don't even really know what those healthy coping skills can look like. So I appreciate that you break those things down.
I'm a big believer in people getting clarity on what is the best version of who they are, and trying to even break that down into concrete action steps that they can review when they're struggling emotionally or when they feel worried, and then acting on one of those behaviors that reflects the best parts of who they are. It's very satisfying to express a good part of self when you're feeling anxious. It's almost like it didn't beat me, right? Like it didn't stop me from being who I can be. And then it also tells the threat center of the brain that's responsible for that anxious signal that there is no threat. Because if you're placing your concern on someone else, if you're doing something that's incompatible with being under genuine threat, it's like, oh, okay, I'll turn down the dial. Maybe the house is not on fire. So there's a lot of things that happen there.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you can kind of walk through this thought with me. Initially, when we talk about what comes up on the side screen, it's kind of that unpacking that you mentioned. And I'm curious, as someone who is very analytical and does really like to unpack a lot of things, and analyze them and try to become aware of, of even taking, say, that social interaction, of trying to look at all those different dynamics and learning from them and kind of trying to figure out my blind spots and whatnot. Is there a space for doing that in a healthy way from the side screen that isn't kind of just a acceptance of this anxiety and coping moving forward?
Right. We're therapists, right? We're all about analyzing feelings and experiences. And there's so much amazing growth that comes out of that, right? So, we would not want to throw that away. Thank you for raising this issue. The two-screen method is for those people and those kind of repetitive patterns, kind of recycled worries and moods that offer no value in life to the person, right? So we're not talking about all hard feelings, because we need to listen to our feelings. Our feelings are important. But if we know that every time we socialize, or the vast majority of the time, there's a reviewer that kicks in when we leave the cocktail party or the date or whatever, that we tend to lose sleep and spoil our day because we review in our minds these social exchanges and interactions, and there's a clear pattern, then we apply the two-screen method, right? So, it's for those issues where there is a clear history and pattern and it's clear that it offers no value to the person, right? And even though it may feel like there's something to analyze in the moment, really you're just going to be doing worry in disguise, right? So, but there's a lot of things, like even grief, I would say, that's more on the front screen. Like, grief is painful and hard, but it also has meaning and is life-giving. So this is not hey, don't feel hard thoughts and feelings. No, this is, hey, for those things in your life, let's say those urges that feed an addictive pattern, or those recycled worries, or those depressed moods after you look at social media and you're getting caught up in the comparison thing, like those things that happen to you, and you just want to de-energize that internal activity. That's when you apply the two-screen method.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm hoping, could you share a little bit more about this social media piece as someone who, does a lot of work in that area and interacts on there a lot, of how in kind of your work you've discussed how social media plays a part in all of this. I know the comparison game is just, I talk about this all the time, and it's very, very unhealthy and not good for us.
Yeah. But I mean, social media is not all bad, obviously. Yeah. There's some really good aspects to it.
I get to share stuff on there.
Exactly.
Positive.
No, I mean, and it's really expanded people's relationship networks. And I mean, so there's a lot of pros to social media. I think it's helpful to have boundaries around it. I think people can be too plugged into social media. And for some people, it's an anxious or depressive trigger because they're seeing other people live these amazing lives and having these amazing experiences, and then they're comparing it to their current state, maybe alone in the apartment, wishing that they had a date or somebody, a friend they could hang out with.
Yeah.
Okay? And then they fall back on a certain narrative, which feeds a depressed mood, or they feel like they're missing out. Now, usually, though, for those folks, there's other things in life that could trigger it. So it's not just social media. It's just social media is such a rich, all-present trigger for that, that it activates a historical narrative inside them about, why don't I get to live the life that other people are living?
Yeah. And I feel like it almost comes up in literally like the blink of an eye. It comes up almost unconsciously that all these thoughts start going, but you're so just zoomed into it that part of you is almost not even aware that this other thing is that you haven't even looked at the side screen yet, but it is just growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes. And then you just realize you have these feelings. And then when you step away, the side screen is like, you're like, oh, that's all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always encourage people to create a profile for their side screen, and you can have different flavors of side screens. Let's say there's a side screen that can get activated around social media, and it's helpful to write, okay, what are the thoughts that tend to come into my mind? How would I describe the feeling, and where do I feel it in my body? So you get a really good profile of it, and then get better and better at noticing when it shows up, right? Because it's always easier to deal with that side screen if you catch it early, right? Before it's turned into the IMAX theater.
Yeah. Yeah, because once it's that IMAX, it's a little tough to deal with.
It is. Very hard to redirect. Sometimes you need to thaw out first and do some grounding or breathing just to turn down the dials.
Yeah. And one thing that I've been wanting us to kind of touch on before we wrap up, which you kind of started to get into with talking about some of the anchors with the healthy distractions and the loving action, but of how people can then kind of use their anxiety in a positive way, and how that can be kind of a tool to use as opposed to one that is, holding you back and holding you down.
Yeah. So anxiety is energy, right? Now, it's an unwelcome form of energy. I mean, let's all be clear.
Yep.
But it is energy that shows up. So the question is, what are we going to do with that energy? And we have the ability to use that energy as an internal reminder and as tailwind to kind of express the best parts of who we are, right? So there's no rule against that. There's nothing to say that when I feel anxious, that's a reminder. And a lot of this is homework ahead of time because it's harder to think in the moment. So in the book, there's certain exercises that I walk people through so they're prepared and they're ready to implement this strategy when they're feeling overwhelmed. But the concept is you create a new stimulus response pattern, right? So the stimulus is side screen activation, the anxious thought or feeling. The old response is going away in your head and worrying or avoiding things, kind of turning inward, okay? And what we're trying to do is create a new stimulus response pattern where in the face of the side screen activation, we start introducing a new response, which is a some sort of action that moves our life forward or some sort of action that represents the best part of who we are. Like I worked with a woman that had flying anxiety, and she one of many great traits that she had or has is being an encourager. Like, and that part would go away when she felt anxious. So when she arrived at LAX, she was determined to be an encourager, even though she was feeling anxious about the upcoming flight. And so she, she'd walk by somebody and say, I love your dress, right? She would, thank the security person for being so patient. Like, so she wouldn't fabricate it. She was someone that really saw kind of what people were doing in life and was determined to focus on being an encourager. And she kind of left this wake of positivity and encouragement behind her as she was winding through, LAX, and she felt good about that. So it's just, again, but there was some nervous energy in the background, but she was just channeling it in a different direction.
Yeah, that's such a good example. Part of me was going to ask of a specific example for how people can do that. And that's a great one. Especially the fact that travel anxiety, I think, is something a lot of people can relate to.
Yes.
Definitely one I can relate to at times too. But now I'm like, I should use this with some of my clients to deal with some of their anxiety and whatnot. I think it puts it into such logical, easy to understand steps that have tangible outcomes to see.
Yes.
And it does also kind of encompass a lot of the work that I would already be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because it gives people something to do and a model, right? Because, when we're in that anxious state, we don't have as much sort of access to the left hemisphere. And, okay, what did we talk about on the couch? And what did I read? What am I, right? It's like they need to have something concrete, right, that they can move towards and apply in that state. So even just, okay, so I use this image. I need to stay off the side screen. Okay, I've got these tools. I'm going to lean forward with my attention, and then I could do one of these 4 different activities, right? So we kind of shrink it down and give them some really easy, accessible things to do. And as that empowerment grows in anxious states,
Yeah. And if people want to do kind of some more research and learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing, why don't you tell people kind of where they can find you?
Yeah, so my website's a good place to go. That's drsymington.com, DRSYMINGTON. And then, of course, my book is on Amazon and everywhere else books are sold. So those would be good places to go.
Awesome. And I think this is also something like when someone reads the book and maybe even watches some of the videos on your website and whatnot too, that they can kind of work through and walk through themselves as well, and not necessarily needing to be, certainly I think being in talk therapy would definitely assist with doing this kind of work. But would you say that's true, that people can kind of walk through this on their own too?
Yes. I would say some people could read the book and that would give them what they needed to really worry less and feel less anxious. I think it's also something that a person could fold into their own therapy, regardless of what kind of therapy it is. Because really, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is just a simple way of de-energizing problematic thoughts and feelings. And it's a skill we all need to master, whether we're in therapy, out of therapy. But yeah, it just, in answer to your question, it depends on what level the anxiety
definitely
is at, right? Some people just need, hey, give me the guidebook. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're good to go. And then for others, as you know, it's more complicated. There's other issues that need to be addressed as well.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I'm really happy that you've shared everything that you have with us today and that we were able to get connected. And I know that listeners will definitely take a lot away from this. So thank you so much for sharing and giving your time to this today. Oh,
my pleasure. Thank you for being interested in it and for everything that you do and how you're helping people.
Thank you. So kind. Thank you guys so much for making it through this episode. I really hope that you guys take away some stuff from Dr. Symington's book and from the 2-screen method. I think it's something super applicable and that I'm definitely going to try out with some of my clients and even myself. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you guys really take some awesome stuff away from this. And I would love if you guys have a minute after listening to this episode to head on over to iTunes and leave just a rating, star review, or if you have, a full minute, then to maybe leave a review and kind of let me know what it is you're liking about the show. It would be super appreciated to see you guys show your support there on iTunes. And I'm just super thankful to be able to do this kind of work and have these conversations, and thought this was a super informative and just great episode today. So thank you guys for making it through, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I will talk to you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.